Hi guys. So it was the King's coronation yesterday. So I thought I'd get out one of my British Seagulls to celebrate Britain and what some of the things we've made. So this is a British Seagull Outboard Motor. These first appeared in the 1930s. I believe they were made up in the Midlands at the Sunbeam Motorcycle Factory. A couple of guys got together and they decided to make an outboard, and these little engines appeared hardly unchanged from the 1930s up to the, oh, there goes a seagull on cue flying over. That's perfect. So these little engines appeared unchanged from the 30s right up to the 1990s. There are obviously a few little tweaks here and there and a few changes, but the main design remained very similar, and it's a very robust design with like an aluminium crankcase with the crankshaft on plain bronze bushes, and then you've got a cast iron detachable cylinder and an aluminium cylinder head, and they're water cooled. This particular model has a Y-pack. No, it's not a Y-pack. This one's got the Villiers ignition, the older Villiers ignition. It's got a 64cc capacity. They've got brass tanks mainly. Most of them are painted black, but they are brass, which is great for, they don't get so corroded inside. They always stay pretty clean inside. What else we got? We've got a very simple carburettor setup. This is a Villiers carburettor. Some of them use Amal carburettors and Bing carburettors. A simple little fuel shut-off valve. It runs with a little cork in there. Just gravity fed. Little throttle, little slide throttle goes onto there. Very simple. Really easy to look after. You can strip these things down and rebuild them and put them back together in a matter of a few hours. You can't see down there, but this has got a direct drive straight off the crankshaft onto like a bevel gear down there, and you've got the little propeller. That's the drive shaft there, goes down there. The exhaust goes down through this tube here, and also the water is drawn up as well by an impeller. So as the water fills up the gearbox, because the gearbox does get a bit of water in it, you have to use a heavy 140 grade gear oil, but water does enter the gearbox a little bit and it creates a kind of emulsion, and that lubricates the very simple gear arrangement. Don't be tempted to put grease in there. The older Seagulls use a 140 weight gear oil, the newer ones use a 90 gear oil. So this is a 1961-62, so this is the older one. The fuel ratio, it's a 2-stroke engine, and it runs on a 10:1 mixture, which is quite a rich mixture. I think that's why the engines last so long, because everything's being bathed in a nice lubricating mist of oily petrol, which is great for keeping everything lubricated. They are a bit of a dirty engine, so environmentally they're not the best, but they do last a long time, and I use a biodegradable 2-stroke oil. That's not an original fuel cap. That should have the metal fuel cap on it, really. There's lots of bits flying around on these engines, so there's not much health and safety. This is the flywheel, and that whizzes round. So yeah, don't be getting any loose clothing near it when it's running or when you're starting it, because a tie or a scarf could get caught up in there, and that would not end well. But apart from that, these are great little engines, so well built, very high quality materials used. Just a great little outboard for a small dinghy. This is the 40 minus. It's got the smaller propeller, so it's designed for little 9-10 foot dinghies. Perfect for that. Some of the bigger ones have much bigger propellers. They've got different gear ratios, and some of them even with the 64cc engine with a bigger propeller and a different gear ratio, can push quite a big boat along. So there we go. Look, let's start her up for you and you can hear her running. Just one thing before I start her up. The kind of starting procedure on these things, fairly straightforward. You have to open up this, obviously put the fuel in, 10 to 1 fuel mixture. So that would be equal to 100 mils of oil added to 1 litre of petrol. And obviously you can alter that depending on how much petrol you use. So you could use 50 mil of oil for half a litre, and so on and so on. So put your fuel in there, open up your tap, and you've got like a tickler. On most of the carburetors have a tickler, certainly on the Villiers you have a tickler. That's the choke, very simple. Let's put the choke down, and then we're going to tickle her with this. By the way, this, don't get misled by that, that's just, I've put that bit of fuel line on there to protect the throttle cable, because it's getting a little bit threadbare around there, so that protects it. So let's tickle her up. There we go, that fills the fuel bowl. It's got a float system in there, and this just holds the float down and allows the fuel to fill up the bowl. So we give that a few little tickles, and then yeah, we'll start her up. What you do, you wrap the rope around here a few times. I think it's about 3 wraps. You don't want to wrap it around too much, because you end up you're being hit in the head with a piece of knotted rope. Because all you use to start these up is a piece of rope with a knot on the end. So you've got to make sure it's good to get the right diameter rope, otherwise it could get jammed in there, and you'll have a lethal whipping machine with the rope stuck on there, the engine starting up, and you're being whacked with a toggle of wood. So that's never happened to me, but I've heard anecdotal stories of that happening. So normally these things start in a good condition. These normally start after 2 to 3 pulls. Choke it maybe a couple of times, and then it normally fires up, and then you can take the choke off gradually, and she's away. There we go. So I didn't even attempt to talk while that was running. They are noisy, and yes, they're not like your modern 2-strokes, like your Honda 4-strokes, which are whisper quiet. Excuse me. But there you go. It is 1930s technology. Now, as you can see, there's a bit of oil dribbling down there. That's normal. You get a bit of 2-stroke leaking out the exhaust around the edge. That's the exhaust tube, which the exhaust literally just goes straight into that, and then it bubbles up. It's just discharged below the water level. What else can we tell you? This one, I bought this one for the princely sum of £20. Now I've given it a complete strip down. Inevitably, when they're like 60, 70 years or whatever old, they do get a fair bit of neglect. And as you saw, I did focus on the little water outlet here, and you can see the water outlet. The water, it's normally like a pencil thickness. That's the water discharging after it's cooled around the cylinder. In the cylinder you've got like water galleries, as it is water cooled. Now these do tend to get corroded and full of crud and sand and stuff, because people often inevitably do not wash these out. If you use it in the salty marine conditions, when you've finished at the end of the day, you should run it fresh water through it and flush it through. Obviously that doesn't always get done. And I've got, let me see, I've got 1, 2, 3, I've got 5 Seagulls, and every single one I've had the barrel and head off. It does say on here, the famous terrifying line, "do not remove." It's a bit ominous. Now obviously, yes, you shouldn't remove that really, but these are well beyond their shelf life. When Seagull made these, they didn't expect these things to be running for 70 years. I don't think they did. So the general guidance was they didn't really like people tampering with them. But when you've got something that's 50, 60 years old, it's going to need a little bit of maintenance to keep it going for another half century or more. So I've had all my barrels off. They take the cylinder head off. This one has the screws. Most of them have the bolts on them. That's a slightly earlier design using a screw system, which is a bit of a pain, but it did come off okay. Take the cylinder head off, take the barrel off. Some of the earlier ones, the later ones, earlier ones, the barrel comes straight off. This one's got a couple of nuts on it as well, a couple of bolts on it. Either way, get the barrel off and give it a good old clean out. There's plenty of good videos on YouTube. Coastal Works describes this process very, very well. And that's where I learnt most of my Seagull maintenance tips and strip down and understanding of the Seagull outboard. So I've had the barrel off it. We've taken the flywheel off. This is a tricky, not tricky, but it's got to be done right. With this one, you've got to make sure the cylinder's at the lowest point. Then you take this nut off, and then you put it on slightly, put it back on a little bit. Then you've got to strike it very hard, one good whack with like a lump hammer. Do not try to use extractors on these. It's a two-man job. One person has to hold the flywheel either side and holds the Seagull upright, and the other person whacks this nut with the lump hammer. It's always a good idea before you do that to take this off, take that off, that all comes off, and that little thing, this little plate comes off. Soak the WD-40 or penetrating oil around the keyway. It's held on with a tapered keyway. Do not use an extractor on this. Whatever you do, you will ruin it, potentially ruin it, and ruin the flywheel, because it's just not designed for that removal method. It's a bit brutish, like a bloody caveman attempt. It's just whacking that basically, and that breaks the hold on the taper, and then that comes off. This one did take a bit of an effort. I had to soak it for a few days, and it did take maybe 3 or 4 whacks, but they do come off. All of mine have come off. Even the really old 1950s one came off. So yeah, they do need a little bit of titillation to keep them going. Other than that, they are wonderfully simple, and they will keep on going. I've heard stories of these things falling off the back of a boat and sinking into the water, and then if you fish it out quickly and give it a good old clean up, it will start up again. So yeah, the good old British Seagull. They did make thousands of these, and they are literally all over the world. You can find these in virtually every continent, every country. They seem to have got everywhere. Simplicity is the key factor with these, and I think that's why they've lasted so long. And also the good quality of the parts they use. Very, very high quality parts. One other little tip. I did this on this one because when I first started doing the Seagulls, I was like a bit of a novice. But you can split the crankshaft. Once you've got the barrel off, sometimes it's a good idea to split the crankshaft. You've got to obviously take this off, the barrel, the flywheel, and then the base plate comes off with there's like a little screw. Where is it? There it is. There's that little screw there. That comes off. That's just like a little clamp screw, and this holds the base plate on. And you can split the crankcase. And I split the crankcase because sometimes these get a little bit of a knock, and you sometimes get a leak here. And 2 strokes need like the vacuum and compression to transfer and exhaust the fumes and mixture. So sometimes you get a little bit of a bubbling around here. So on this particular one, I split the crankcase. It's just 4 bolts, 1, 2, and 4 the other side, 2 the other side, and just put a little bit of gasket sealer on there, then clamp it back up again, and that's good for years. And it's just a little while the barrel's off. It's so easy to do. So this one's running a Villiers coil, which is a bit old and they can be a bit delicate. I did have a few issues with it. I had to solder a new wire onto the coil. This Seagull's probably not really going to go on a boat because I've got a newer one that I take out on my little boat, but I just like playing with this one. So you can upgrade these to the more reliable Y-pack system for relatively 60 odd quid or something. You have to get a new flywheel, which is designed to take the Y-pack ignition, which is a bit more modern. There's nothing wrong with the Villiers one, but a lot of them are like at least 60 odd years old, so they are getting a little bit old, and the wires, the windings in the coil get a bit tired. So it's probably not advisable to take a Seagull out with a Villiers coil onto the sea unless you know it's really reliable, because if that coil fails suddenly you'll be stuck with no power. So I mean, that's what I've been told anyway. There's some great websites out there. John at SOS Saving Old Seagulls, that's a great source of information. He's a wealth of knowledge and he supplies all the parts. There's another company, Sheridan Marine. They also, I think they took over Seagull, and they stock all the parts. Seagulls aren't made anymore. They stopped making them in the 1990s, I believe. They did try to modernise with the Q series, I think it was called. It looked more like a modern outboard, but the parts are really very available. eBay's a great source, and then if you go on Facebook, there's like quite a few British Seagull Facebook groups, very helpful. Some super people on there. Always there's some really highly polished Seagulls on there. I mean, my Seagull is pretty original looking, but some people like seriously go to town on them and they polish them up to the inch of their life, and you wouldn't want to use it. I mean, mine's all fine, it's perfect, works beautifully, but I kept it fairly original looking. Didn't polish it. But some people, I mean, I take my hat off to them. They look so beautiful. I mean, they look better than when they come out of the factory. A lot of this stuff's all alloy, and there's chrome on the drive pipe, which is that's where the drive goes down to the propeller. I tell you what, I'll get it out quickly. I'll show you the propeller system on it quickly. Let's get her out and have a quick look at that. So here she is out the water. So as I say, this is a 40 minus, which is the smallest Seagull. I think there was a smaller one. The really early ones had a smaller engine. This is the smallest of the 64cc models, I believe. So here's your gearbox. So there's your crankshaft, like a square drive. A square drive rod comes down here. Just goes on here, then you've got like a crown wheel and a pinion affair. That's all it is. This is direct drive. Some of the other Seagulls do have a clutch, and some of them have a neutral. I think some may even had a reverse, I'm not sure. Some of the bigger models. But I say this is the 64cc platform. There's a 102cc platform as well. I've only got 64cc ones, which are the most commonly encountered ones. It's got quite a diddy little propeller on it, so it's really small compared to my finger. As I say, this is designed for the smaller dinghies. That is where the exhaust comes out. There's the exhaust, comes down the bigger tube and literally just bubbles up out of there. And then the water kind of goes in there as well. And in here we have like a plastic, it's a very basic turbine, like little plastic impeller thing, which is on the drive shaft, and that just whizzes round and it directs water down a little groove that's cast into there and up through there, and it enters into the cylinder, and that's what water cools it. That's the cooling water. Then it exits out that little hole there. So that's really important, that you've got clear waterways. Like I say, if you've got an old Seagull and you don't know too much about it, run it up a bit, see what happens, but you will have to be prepared for possibly a bit of major surgery cleaning it out. But it's not difficult to do. It's really fun. I love stripping these old things down and having a fiddle with them. It's such fun. But that's the plastic filler point. So you have to that's where the oil goes in. You kind of put the gearbox is half full with oil, don't overfill it. Yeah, that's about it really. It's ever such a great little thing. I do really love these little Seagulls. I'll quickly show you my other Seagulls I've got in here. Let's go have a quick look in the garage. I've got 3 roosting in here at the moment. We've got a slightly newer 40 minus there. It's got a slightly more modern propeller on it. That's a 1971. Then we've got a 40 LS. Now this is my oldest one, that's from the 1950s. Same 64cc engine. They spent a little bit more money on decorating them. The newer ones have a plastic starter, while the older ones have alloy. You've got the best outboard motor in the world. And then we've got on here the best outboard motor for the world. What's that one? That's for the world as well. That's a 1972 40 plus. This is probably the most popular one. Very popular. That's my first Seagull, that one. It's got a bigger propeller on it. Same sort of system though, but it's got the bolt-on head. That's got a bolt-on head. This one's got studs. The older LS has got the studs. That's got the bolt-on head. They've all got the same sort of carburetors. See, there's more use of alloys on the older ones. I do really like this fuel tank as well. I've kept this original, just lacquered it. It has the metal fuel cap with the brass air valve that you open up to let the air in. These are plastic. I do love that. Look at that. Isn't that nice? I do like that. As I say, this is the company you want to go to get parts and advice. He's fantastic, this guy, John at Seagulls Seagulls. We do have one more Seagull residing in the house as well. I was allowed to put one in the house by my lovely wife. Took a bit of persuasion, but we've got another Seagull here. This one's on display. It's a runner and everything. This one runs fine. We might get this one out later on. But yeah, here we go. That's a roundup of my British Seagull collection. Hope you enjoy the little film of them. And I better stop waffling my head on. So everyone enjoy the bank holiday. Well, it is in the UK anyway. Anyone else in the rest of the world, whoever watches this, have a good weekend, and over and out. Bye for now.